True aspiration often emerges not from effort or gradual progress, but from the deep experience of annihilation, the dissolution of the self as it was previously known. This paradoxical process strips away illusions, attachments, and conditioned desires, leaving only what is essential and true. It is in the space of emptiness, after the death of former identities, that real aspiration arises, not as a personal ambition, but as an undeniable inner force calling towards something beyond the self. It is as if our being must first be wounded by the impossible, marked by an absence that cannot be filled through any personal effort. The process is deeply organic. We do not initiate this spiritual movement. Rather, it awakens within us precisely through the experience of complete destructuring. The deeper the annihilation, the stronger the aspiration becomes, not as an egotistic desire, but as a pure orientation towards the transcendent. It is an inverse spiritual law. Maximum void produces maximum tension towards the absolute. These experiences leave within us a trace, a taste of the impossible that haunts us. But it is not the experiences themselves that matter, but how they wound us with the impossible, the way they mark us with an absence that no subsequent experience can fill. Thus, true aspiration is wounded into us, not developed over time. True aspiration is what makes any spiritual practice real, rooted in the origin of truth. This wound becomes a space of resonance for the transcendent. Precisely when the self is on the brink of annihilation, then the purest aspiration manifests, not the aspiration of the self, but of the void itself. It is born from the absence of any personal pretension, from the impossibility of clinging to our own will or our own projects. What maintains attention alive is this wound, this opening that cannot be closed. Not will or effort, these being merely instruments of the project, of the possible, but a possession through absence, a fundamental inability to turn our gaze away from the impossible. This possession through absence transforms the very nature of our attention. It is no longer about directed, controlled attention, but about an attention that is born from the very inability to ignore the wound of the impossible. It is as if the void itself becomes active within us, generating a form of striving that does not originate in will. Paradoxically, it is precisely when we abandon any attempt to produce transformation that it begins to manifest organically. Annihilation thus becomes not an endpoint but the beginning of a new dynamic. The emptier we are of ourselves, the stronger the orientation toward the transcendent becomes. It is not an orientation we produce, but one that is produced in us through the very experience of the void. This pure aspiration appears precisely at the moment of maximum powerlessness, when all resources of the self are exhausted, when every personal project is abandoned, then a form of striving manifests that no longer belongs to the order of will. At this point, spiritual transformation reveals its completely non-voluntary character. It is not something we can produce or control, but something that is produced in us through the very experience of the impossible. The wound of the impossible thus becomes not just the source of aspiration, but also the space in which a form of attention manifests that transcends any personal effort. This may be the essence of spiritual transformation. It does not come through accumulation or development, but through emptying and wounding. Not through the power of will, but through the experience of total powerlessness. In this sense, annihilation is not just a preliminary condition, but the very modality through which authentic aspiration manifests, an aspiration that no longer belongs to the self, but to the void itself. In the deepest night of your soul, when everything you believed yourself to be has been stripped away, when every light has gone out and every hope has crumbled, do not turn away. This is not your end. This is your beginning. For it is precisely here, in this impossible void, that something extraordinary occurs, the birth of a pure aspiration that is not yours, yet moves through you with devastating clarity. Your very wounds become windows. Your emptiness becomes a vessel. Your inability to move forward becomes the forward movement itself. You are not meant to fill this void. You are not meant to heal this wound. This shattering is not a mistake to be corrected but a door being opened by hands greater than your own. The more completely you are broken, the more purely you can aspire. The more thoroughly you are emptied, the more truly you can see. This is the great paradox. It is not in your moments of strength, but in your utter powerlessness that you become most purely available to the impossible. Your collapse becomes your capability. Your endings become your openings. And what emerges is not a stronger version of your old self, but something entirely new, an aspiration born not of your will, but of the void itself. Let yourself be haunted by this impossible absence. Let yourself be wounded by this unattainable light. For it is only when we cease trying to produce transformation that we become available to be transformed.